Welcome back, everybody, to the Just People Pod. I am your co-host, Cece Jones Davis, with my special co-host, John Mays. How's everybody doing? We are here today with a great friend of ours. We love him so much. He does so much for the world. He does so much for the people around this country. He does so much for Jesus. And so, Jason Faleta, we're so glad to have you. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well. And thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Jason, we're going to hop right into it today. And, I've always found your background to be so interesting and incredible. So I want you to start off kind of just introducing yourself in your own words and giving us just a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So once again, thank you for inviting me to do this. And I appreciate you both so much and admire both of you deeply. So a little bit about me. I grew up outside Chicago. My parents immigrated here from Egypt. My dad comes from a small city in the south of Egypt called Malawi. My mom's from Cairo. They came to the US thinking it would be really short term and ended up staying and having children and building a life here. And part of the reason for that is because their experience as Coptic Egyptians. So most people, if they are familiar with the word Coptic, which simply just means Egyptian in the ancient Egyptian language, they're familiar with the Coptic Orthodox Church, which is a very old historic tradition of Christianity that goes all the way back to Mark, who wrote the book of Mark, Saint Mark. He's credited as the founder of the church. So we're talking like an ancient faith, But I didn't actually grow up in an Orthodox home. My parents were part of this tiny, tiny sliver of Coptic evangelicals. And so though my lineage is in the Orthodox Church, and I have many family members who remain a part of it, I grew up in this Coptic but evangelical household. And
wait, stop
yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Stop right there. I have never in my life heard of such. When I think about Orthodox, I have these particular imageries, right? Like I think about smoke, I think about high ceilings, people in robes,
Yes.
maybe some, language that's not English. I think about these kinds of things. Lots of liturgy, maybe sitting up, getting down, standing up, getting down, all that kind of stuff. What does it mean to be Coptic evangelical? What does that look like?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, so the word that they would use generally is just Protestant rather than evangelical. I add that, one, because nowadays more and more people in the community are using that. But two, because the church, and this might be more history than people want to hear, but I am a professor, so I can't help myself.
Give it to us. Let us know. What is this?
So this church was born out of Presbyterian missionaries who came from Princeton to Egypt. And this would have been like late 20th century, around the late 1900s, 1800s. So 19th century or early 20th, somewhere around there. And essentially these Presbyterians had some converts from the Orthodox tradition to what was just broadly defined as the Coptic Presbyterian, the Synod of the Nile. That's the actual order. And then there was distance. And so like a lot of faith expressions that are indigenously African, the African expression of Presbyterianism is far more similar to charismatic Christianity in the US. So it was a holy rolling tradition, a lot of belief in the power of the Spirit, reliance on the Spirit, prayer. It is what I would broadly describe as a loud experience. So sometime when I got older and learned this history, I was like, wow, the PCUSA people I know, or the Presbyterians I know, wouldn't know what to do with this stuff, but it is technically part of or connected somehow. So, that's just, I say all that to say is I would not be who I am if it wasn't for all those who brought me here, you know? And that most recently was my parents and my grandfather who helped to raise me. But it was really many generations of people faithful to Jesus, as my family's indigenous to Egypt and has been following Jesus like since the earliest times of people following Jesus, you know?
Powerful.
I'd love to hear more about how the type of Christianity that you came from, while also Protestant when you got to the US. Like, I remember there being some pretty stark differences.
Yeah, the real confrontation happened between the faith that I was raised in, which, you know, we read in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, where God says, I have heard the cries of my people in Egypt. I see their suffering. We read that and believed it, okay? Like, we knew God was near. I was very well acquainted with injustice because the Coptic Christian experience, depending on where someone is growing up, can be very harsh. And in my particular family, it had been harsh. And I was not, you know, I was maybe 3 years old when I learned what political asylum was. These and became aware of like displacement and you know, I feel like American Christians, when they talk about persecution, honestly, sometimes it can be fetishizing it. But when you talk about persecution, you're talking about poverty. You were talking about Jim Crow style laws that say you can work here, you can't work here. Or if you work here, you get paid half as much. And it's on the books. It's like a policy people follow. So that discrimination, words that like sometimes people who are really able to have an appetite for the concept of persecution for the name of Christ don't understand it. It means injustice. It means discrimination. It can mean violence even. And so I had the two things I was really aware of was one, that was the reality of much of the world. It was not my experience. I was uniquely safe from that because I got to grow up where I grew up. And two, God never intended it to be that way. That was the other thing I knew even as a 7-year-old. This was all grievous to the Lord, you know? Creator God, he didn't create the world to look this way. And so the confrontation with a different Christian worldview came when I miraculously had the chance to go to a Christian school. And that change happened in middle school. And my parents, I remember like the relief, the joy they felt at this amazing opportunity, having grown up like in the environment they grew up in as serious minorities, to have me be able to go to a school where we could pray. But it was at that school that I was introduced to a totally different Jesus. He was unconcerned about injustice, discrimination, poverty, violence. His only concern was, do you have your ticket to heaven or not? And if you want it, you just got to say these magic words. It was real, you know, real simple, real Harry Potter type stuff. And and as a child, though, you know, and I'm trying to summarize like an entire subculture in like 3 sentences, but as a kid, I felt the disconnect. And I really did feel like because attached to this new version of Christianity that I'll just broadly call American Christianity, that frankly was far more American than Christian.
Yep.
There was a supremacy with that worldview that said, we are the only ones who have the correct reading of scripture. We are the only ones who have a correct understanding of what it means to live for Christ. So it means your beliefs reside inside of this box, and anything outside of that box is not of Christ and is not of his kingdom. And so, you know, a choice had to be made. And I was like, I know God is real. I have encountered him. I have seen him work in my life, in my parents' life, in my family's life. I know prayer is real, but I can't sign up for what is in here. And so I was really young, you know, like in the last 10 years when a lot of people were having what people started to describe as like deconstruction journeys and stuff. I had that experience, but at like age 12 when I entered middle school, and I just sort of was in this wilderness where it left me was I wasn't letting go of what I knew in my heart and soul and bones about who God was, but I was definitely not signing up for that box that I was presented with. And it left me very cynical. I was jaded. I think I felt angry that they thought everyone essentially in my family who had come before me had it wrong. You know, there were just a lot of things about it that left me, like, as a teenager, pretty cynical. Yeah.
How did you, considering, I mean, you were so young, clearly so bright, and becoming so cynical, how did you survive in that environment?
That's a really good question. Barely, to be honest. I mean, that was a struggle. It was a really tough time. Thankfully, like, the Lord brought me friends at different seasons who I felt seen by, or at least who also weren't buying into this vision, this, this kind of counterfeit. They also weren't buying into it for their own reasons. And so we kind of found solace in each other. And when I went to college, thankfully, I was able to reconstruct and I was able to make sense of that dissonance, that had resulted in it. I realized a couple of things. Like, I got to college and I realized, oh, I've kind of been on a high horse since before I even went through puberty. Like, I've thought I know better and I can't stand these people and this, but what have I done? Who have I been? I'm not out here fighting injustice, fighting for the kingdom. Like, I'm judging them for not doing that, but what am I doing? And I had this, like, introspection. And then, I still believe the gospel is fundamentally irresistible. You don't need to convince people. You don't need to sell people. You don't need to show them the math equation. You don't have to draw the bridge in the Romans road and all that stuff. They don't need that. It's not a math equation. When you encounter the love of Jesus, you can't resist. Like, you want it. So I encountered people who were chasing after Christ in his kingdom. And I was like, I need to be a part of this, And so that's where it came, that full circle happened for me. And I've basically been flying by the seat of my pants ever since then.
I know what you mean by that.
Yeah,
My
you do.
favorite thing about you. One of the things that I like about you is just that recognition of, like, at a young age being like, cool, I can just judge folks for not doing the thing that I know is key and paramount to the faith, but also like that's easy to armchair quarterback it, but you got involved. And so you've done some pretty remarkable things, and you can touch on whatever you like, from, the Micah Challenge to working with Tier Fund. But I know some of those things, or at least I believe, if I remember correctly, some of those things were even connected to funding that was provided federally. And so, like, you've got expertise in some of these hot conversations around things like USAID that are playing out, that everyone, myself included, have an opinion on, but I don't understand. Like, I'm not in that world. And so I'd love for you just to talk a little bit about really any of those organizations or the work that you've done in that space, and why that makes you uniquely gifted to give us some narrative on really what's playing out.
Yeah, happy to. And I would say, like, that, I mean, even just hearing those words, like, it hurts, because, like, those cuts, there is they are fundamentally were rooted in misinformation and just straight up lies. And people, I've just been astonished. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I have been astonished at how easily people will perpetuate a lie for so many different reasons. It could be something as shallow as, oh, I'm on this team, so my team's telling this lie, so I'll tell the lie. Or it could be, it's confirmation bias. Like, this is what I want to believe, so I'm going to believe. There's a million different reasons, but at the end of the day, it's just people perpetuating something that really caused harm. So I guess I'll work my way towards that, but I'll tell you some of the work I did. So yeah, right out of college, after I had this kind of radical conversion, I got involved with this student group. And the best way I could describe it is if like InterVarsity and Amnesty International were one organization. And
it's a dope group. That would
yeah,
be a dope group.
it was so dope. It was transformative. It changed my life. We worshiped together, we prayed together, we organized together, we advocated together. And I caught this bug. Initially I kind of envisioned myself just literally feeding the hungry, like clothing the naked, visiting those in prison, and just on a very personal, individual level, engaging with those on the margins. But I was stuck in college and I was like, well, I have limitations here. Like, what can I do as a North American college student? And that's where I started writing letters to Congress. I started paying attention to policy. And then before I knew it, like, we were influencing our member of Congress to vote against his party to protect SNAP benefits for people experiencing hunger. We were influencing our member of Congress, who was a fellow believer, to cancel the debts of the poorest nations in the world, when everyone else in his party was like, no, accountability, you borrow money, you pay it back. And he was like, no, this is wrong. We should have never lent money to this dictator to begin with. We're not going to hold. So I had this like magical year as a senior in college where I like sprinkled, my effort into some advocacy, and I saw radical policies like influenced. And so I caught that bug. I caught that bug big time. And I was like, "Oh, this is huge. The scale and potential of holding our leaders accountable to how they treat the poorest in our world is immense." And thankfully, at the same time, God was working through a movement called the Micah Challenge globally. And Micah was started by a number of Christian leaders from the global South, coming out of Latin America and Africa and Asia, in partnership with some European Christians. And they were like, they're coming from the evangelical tradition, a lot of evangelical denominations. And really the thought was, we've been intervening on behalf of people living in poverty and hunger in our communities for years, but we can see bad policy ruin that overnight. And one thing our community's not been good at is speaking up to protect vulnerable communities from bad policy or encouraging good policy. So they created this really wild, you could tell it was truly a movement. Like, it was disorganized, it was chaotic. We were all over the place. Like, it was so much fun to be a part of some amazing years. You never knew what you were going to get into. So like my counterpart, just to give a short picture, in Sierra Leone, his name was Sirajin. He started organizing churches, and next thing you knew, they were like, you know what we really need? We can't even hold our politicians accountable because they don't make promises when they're campaigning. Like, we need to have debates here. So Micah Challenge Sierra Leone partnered with BBC Africa, and we're talking like small time assemblies of God ministers and small, Christian leaders in this country to put on the very first presidential debates for the country of Sierra Leone during the 2007 election. And I was there as like a 20-something-year-old, the guy who led Micah Challenge in the US. I got to be there as this honored guest. I remember thinking, like, I should not be here. Like, there are Sierra Leonean leaders who have like bled for this nation. They should be in this room. There's only like 50 people allowed in. How am I getting this seat? So on the one hand, it felt wrong, but on the other hand, I'm like, I can't believe this is what I get to do. And then I worked, that election as an election monitor to ensure specifically, we toured churches leading up to the election to give speeches for women to know you can vote who you want to vote for. You don't have to vote for who your husband wants you to vote for. And two, ensuring accessibility and mobility and transportation to the polls for people with disabilities. That was in 2007. I was 24 years old. That's the kind of stuff we got into, and it was just, that's what I mean when it was like a wild movement. You never knew what you were going to be doing. So yeah, we did a lot of that. Oh, and by the way, the grant to pull off some of that mobilization work, where we went to small town churches to ensure like women voted for who they wanted to, and people with disabilities had access to the polls. That came from a USAID grant. That was a sub grant from, we weren't handing out condoms to Hamas or whatever they were saying back in the Doge days. I mean, literally, I was preaching Jesus, like joining hands with brothers and sisters in Christ in ensuring that the most vulnerable in this society had a vote.
Jesus. Lord have mercy. And Jason, let me tell you how wild this is, to just, because you have gone over to other countries to essentially fight for democracy, right?
Absolutely.
To fight for people's rights to have a voice in the country they live in and they're from. I'm amazed that these days we have people within the Church of Jesus Christ here in America who are fighting to get women off the rolls.
Yeah.
I was just listening to some guy on a clip on social media a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how he's fighting for a one family vote, where the man votes and the women don't, because they are underneath the man. And so to hear what you were doing in 2007, right, in another country, to liberate and encourage women to vote, letting them know that they then had the right to vote. And where we are today, where we have U.S. citizens in 2026, Christians saying, oh, women don't need the right to vote. I never would have thought that I would hear such a thing in the United States of America. That's just, I just had to throw that in as you were talking about the women in voting. I cannot believe that people are forming their mouths as hard as women have fought in this country to vote. Minorities of every kind in this country, right? But I can't believe that is where we are. But that is very much just an example, a short of example of where it's come to here in the U.S.
It's very disorienting. It's so, because the context of that trip, and it's funny because when I talk about the Micah Challenge, there's 1,000 stories I could tell. That's one I rarely tell, actually. And it just came out today. And I don't think it just came out. I think there's a reason. It's because it connects with your mission and your work right now. And so, like, the Lord put that on my heart probably to share. But it is disorienting, like, how I'm seeing things happen in our nation that feel familiar, but not because I ever saw them here before.
Right.
Because I might have seen them in a place like Sierra Leone, first election after their civil war, second poorest country in the world at the time, like zero infrastructure. The scars of war were everywhere. I mean, there were people missing limbs because in the previous election, rebel groups were threatening people that if they participated in the election, they would lose their hand for voting. And that was symbolic because your hand is how you symbolize that you voted. You dip your finger in this inkwell and it marks you. So they would take the limbs of people who voted. We were there just a few short years after that election, their first election since that one. And I'm like, how is it that I was encountering, I'm telling you about things that happened then in 2007.
Right.
And now some of those same challenges are facing our nation in 2026.
20 years later.
It's very disorienting. And, the details are different. The times have changed. There's technology, this and that, all the other things. But there's a spirit there that is congruous. Like there is a, this is maybe going to get too philosophical for you all, but I have to say it because it's one of my most foundational beliefs is you know, in a time when like people are prone to a postmodern worldview, your truth, my truth, their truth, this kind of thing. There are some universal truths in this world. Okay. This is a great example of one of them. But like the powerful universally, whether it's in this country in 2026, Sierra Leone in 2007, Papua New Guinea in the year 7, you know, there will be some commonalities, such as the oppression of women. Okay.
Yes.
There is no culture on this planet, whether I'm talking in all of history, in all of time, where women have not experienced disenfranchisement, violence, or abuse from men. That is a universal truth. That's not my truth, your truth, their truth. That is truth. Okay. There is the exclusion of people with disabilities and minorities. The those kinds of things are true in all time, in all history. And the only universal truth powerful enough to balance that scale, because that's a heavy thought. Like, I rattled it off without falling into tears because I think about these things and I've been thinking about them since I was like 5. But, you know, but that's a heavy truth. Okay. In all cultures, in all times, in all places. And the only thing more true, more powerfully true, is that Christ is actually king. And in his kingdom, he will overcome this injustice, you know, and that his kingdom, when it comes in full, will no longer have that disenfranchisement of women, will no longer have those barriers to people with disabilities.
Amen.
Racism, sexism, all of it. So I don't know how we got there, but
no, that's good.
yeah.
It's really, really good. I want to go back just a little bit,
Yes.
and I know you want to jump in as well. I want to go back just a little bit because you mentioned some really important things. First, you mentioned that you were part of the Micah Challenge. Everybody ought to know Micah 6:8. Jason, what does it say?
What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God.
That's right. That's right. That's my favorite, one of my favorite passages of all time. What does the Lord require, not suggest, but to do justice? You use some terminology about the work that you were doing around like advocating for folks. SNAP, right? So I just want folks to know that SNAP is the benefit that was a part of most recently the Big Beautiful Bill that was passed under this administration that cut food stamp assistance, food security assistance to the most vulnerable in the U.S. And I don't say that just to be a Debbie Downer. Like this is statistically the truth. Like, so we're talking about the elderly, we're talking about children, we're talking about veterans, we're talking about the disabled, right? And so these groups of folks who used to rely on on the federal government for some food security, this has been a hard season for them, right? You talked about USAID. I want folks to know because it broke my heart when USAID was torn up, right? USAID, in my opinion, is or was the most benevolent organization of the United States of America.
Absolutely.
The most benevolent. We did vaccines that were saving people's lives. We did HIV/AIDS meds, clinics that were saving and prolonging people's lives around the world. We were doing education for women and girls where there was not education provided for women and girls around the world. I mean, we were doing such goodwill that to go for Doge to go after that particular organization first, it just didn't make any sense. Can you speak to that a little bit, Jason? Like, what did you make of USAID coming, like, collapsing?
Yeah, it was, to be frank, it was wickedness. It was, you just talked about some of the good things.
Yeah.
We could talk forever about the good things that came from that organization. And I want to break down what I mean. Like, when people, especially those who were dismissive of USAID, one, they were under the illusion it was very expensive. Yeah. But let me tell you what, none of that stuff was all that expensive. Okay. It was less than 0.1% of the US federal budget. Okay. Trying to save money and cut the deficit by destroying USAID is like trying to lose weight by cutting your hair. It's not gonna matter. It just won't matter. But your hair matters a lot, okay? Because if it's all gone, you look very different, right? So it's actually it's a pretty good metaphor. I hadn't even thought about that level of it. Like, it's not that expensive, but it did a lot. And also, second misconception, the US government's a bad administrator. The government's, is bad at, they're not inefficient, this and that. And they imagine, even, especially during the Obama years, Obama and Joe in a helicopter flying over an African country, chucking a duffel bag of cash down to some dictator. That is not how these things were implemented. You know how they were implemented? Christian organizations, like the ones I worked for, would see an RFP online, a request for a proposal. We would fill out an application. We would be vetted. They would make sure that our bank accounts never touched that of terrorists. We had to sign a million different documents. You go through this intense process, and then you can receive a grant. And honestly, many of the projects I particularly was a part of were subgrants of subgrants by a much bigger, larger Christian organization, like even Samaritan's Purse. Okay. So like some of the very organizations that the Christian community that cheered for the destruction of USAID, they might be donating to the World Visions, the Samaritan's Purses, the World Reliefs. I mean, I could keep naming them, MAP International, et cetera, et cetera. They might be donating with their left hand to some of these Christian organizations, and then with their right hand holding up a banner that says, Doge USAID, tear it all down. And I don't think they realize that those organizations are receiving these grants,
Yeah.
And not just them. There are many other Catholic charities, and then many non-Christian organizations. But, this work was being done by not by the government. It was being granted out to the experts who knew how to do these things. An organization that I'm still very connected to, some of the most amazing interventions in war zones that I saw, as far as like gender protection and rights for women, decreasing violence against women through Bible studies and trainings to introduce people to like peace and the concept of shalom and this and that, funded by USAID, So it was not corruption that was being funded. Now, had there ever been something that was a waste or something that didn't get spent the way it was supposed to? I'm sure. I'm not like an apologist pretending there was perfection, but I will tell you, I mean, I will never forget a woman I met in Uganda named Mary Olanyo, who was only alive because she was getting antiretroviral HIV drugs from a teeny tiny Ugandan organization.
That's right.
Run out of her local church. And that Ugandan organization was getting those drugs from a larger Ugandan organization that was national. And they were getting that from that was a subgrant of a grant.
That's right.
That in the end, I traced up to World Vision. Yeah. And I'm like, you're telling, and back to USAID. And I was like, this woman is only alive today because of this intervention she's getting at her local church.
That's right.
And it comes back to US. Yeah.
Let me just, because that's really interesting. And John, I promise I'm gonna shut up now that you can talk. That's really interesting because I spent some time in Uganda, specifically working and doing research in HIV/AIDS, and I was in these little, very, very rural places, right? And I was in Uganda because at the time Uganda was like the model country to have had the highest rates of HIV and improved so much, right, in transmission and deaths. Like had just was taking the continent by storm because whatever they were doing there, it was working. And let me tell you, the church was leading that work.
Absolutely.
The church was leading that work. I saw it with my own eyes, and they could not have done it without the funding that came from other places so that people could get on these medications, live longer to take care of their children, live longer to work to take care of their children, live longer and not spread the virus to the next person. I mean, this stuff. So when USAID cut off, people got to understand that those medications, those little clinics that you're talking about, Jason, those little bitty clinics have shut down. We're about to see HIV infections numbers. When the new statistics come out of the demographics, they're going to be wild. I don't want to see them, but I feel that's what we're going to see. I just wanted to say that because it's so true about Uganda.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there has been and there will be an increase in mortality in our world because of that choice. And so going back to your original question, like, why was that destroyed first? And it was on a weekend. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like
to miss the news. Yeah.
I think it's because what I tried to refer to earlier is like the perpetuation of a lie. The lie was, you're struggling here because our government has spent all of its money, quote unquote, helping people in far-flung corners of the universe.
Yep.
When the reality was they had barely spent any money. None of that help was for free, by the way. Like post 9/11, when our country was deeply concerned with security and anti-terrorism, all these nations signed up to our various protocols and security agreements and things. And this was all part of the big soup of diplomacy to create a better and safer world. The US economy benefited immensely from a lot of this work, immensely. US agricultural producers, hugely, different parts of the US economy. So it wasn't for nothing. It wasn't that expensive as far as the budget goes. But it came to symbolize basically the other. It came to symbolize like a lie. And that is a really high price to pay. Like the human cost is too high.
Yep.
It seems like that being one of the earlier things that was done is it plants this seed of scarcity in the American mind that the average American person would already be feeling based upon the inflation, the economy, rural areas being in decline, urban areas being in decline. So you're already feeling this sense of lack. And then this narrative is planted like, hey, this lack that you're feeling is because of everything that's not American. Like these funds and everything going out there, which then I think maybe whets the palate a little bit for the harsh immigration policies that come next. And like to me, it was just kind of the tip of the spear for some of the policy that would be enacted moving forward is that American first mindset and refusing to ask the question, like, who is my neighbor? And like really sitting with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's disturbing about it too is like, even if you really, really felt a deep conviction of like America first, like our people first, because I actually know reasonable people who have a deep conviction for that. Like they're really proud of this country and they have a conviction of like, I need to look out for, my community first.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, if that even is your like organizing principle, what's best for us is what's best for everyone. So like the destruction of civil society and society as a whole, and the mortality and the death and the inequality and the injustice and the enmity and the violence that gets spread all over the world when you have this dramatic destruction of our work and diplomacy around the world. That's not us first. That's actually bad for us. Like, so even if you held that mentality sincerely, like I said, which I know there are people who do, you would want, and that was the logic of George W. Bush and what was defined as compassionate conservatism, or when Marco Rubio, when he was a senator in that season. So anyway, I feel what you're saying about this scarcity, because we did then see it translate to here, right? Like we created us's and them's and others here in our own nation very rapidly.
100%.
Yeah.
How did as John is bringing up this immigration stuff, coming from an immigrant family, how has this been for you and your family, just to kind of witness in the last year and a half what other immigrants have been going through.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely made me think in new ways about the reality of my life, honestly. I had a conversation with my kids recently because they asked me what birthright citizenship was. And I was like, technically, I'm a birthright citizen because I was born to non-citizen parents and I am a citizen of this country. And the so I'm not affected, right? And that law didn't end up being overturned or that portion of the Constitution. But to know that there was like a movement of people who think that kind of citizenship is unjust and unwarranted and undeserved, it just made me think about my own life in new ways. I'm like, wow, I take for granted the fact that I have the privileges I have. I need to remember to be thankful for these privileges, you know? Or even, you hear things thrown around the news like chain migration, and ending chain. That's how my family got here, you know? And just realizing like I need to be grateful I am here while we still could be. If it was this policy environment and this cultural environment, then I wouldn't know the two of you and I would not be here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's just made me obviously reflect in that sense. And then it's made me just grieve deeply for like friends, neighbors, brothers and sisters who don't share those same statuses that I have and who I'm in community with and who are living in perpetual fear, anxiety, stress, pain. That's been it's taken a toll. It has taken a toll.
I get it. I get
Can
it.
imagine. I don't know if you remember having to switch up our language a little bit in a previous life when we were working on some different justice things inside of an evangelical church where I couldn't use the word environmentalism. We had to switch it up to creation care because there was so much of a stigma around the idea of environmentalism. And as I was talking to some other folks, they were like, well, it's like when there's so many people like, those made in the image of God who are being affected by all these other things, it feels a little weird to be talking about, the planet or the whales or some seals. And so there was this disconnect that like environmentalism, creation care isn't connected to people. And as I've been thinking about that recently, just this idea that in Western culture, there's this idea that we're separate from the land, that we are not of the land, that we are not part of this ecosystem, but separate from it. I was wondering if you would, for those who might be listening to this, like I've got friends who just don't get the like environmentalism and why we should care about that, because again, they're focused on people. And so I would love for you to kind of close that gap for us. For those who think that environmentalism is just about animals and sea turtles, how does this impact people, particularly the global south and people on the margins?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. And it's unexpected. Well, first of all, sea turtles are incredible creatures. And
I love them.
yeah, turtles in general, those creatures that can live over 100 years, like when we meet a human who makes it to 100, right? We all feel this kind of awe, and we start doing the math, and we're like, man, you're 100, it's 22. You were born when women couldn't vote, or whatever the marker in history is. Will you meet a sea turtle? It could be like 160 years old. Like then you do the math on that, let alone a tree, which John and I had the pleasure of visiting some ancient trees. And to this day, it was one of the most soul nourishing experiences of my entire life, was to literally just put my hand on this 4,000 or 3,000-year-old tree and to think, my goodness, you were here when David was crowned king of Israel. Oh my goodness. And you're still here, just mind blowing. So the environment is cool, first of all. Like, I mean, really, if you need some enchantment or levity in your life, just like look at a pine cone or something. Like, God gave us this amazing world for many reasons, and that is one of them. But from a world, like just from an understanding of the world, like it goes back to the book of Genesis. And like when God created all things in the garden, everything was good and there was an interdependence. So like I love to think about the garden as the way God intended, is like a map, for a roadmap to how society should function, how we should function, how we should relate to the rest of creation. And in that setting, before there was sin, there was not like use and abuse and extraction of the land and calling it good. It was an interdependence. All creation was thriving. Humanity was thriving. Animals were thriving. The plants were thriving, and and really, that's a reflection of God having interdependence with God's self, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We see it even present in creation, and it is a just absolute like falsehood if we think that our impact on the environment isn't going to impact us. But even if it didn't, we should still care, because like God gave us this command to care for this earth. And so in real terms though, the further degraded the environment is, the further degraded humans are. It's just, we can't escape it. Like it is the environment, literally. Like it is our landscape for everything. So when you see like climate change ravaging nations, you see an increase in hunger because food production falls. Okay. When you see, I was just in the southern eastern part of Africa, in Malawi and a day in Kenya, in talking to just everyday church people in those communities. They have no idea that climate change is like a tense political issue. They just know of it as a reality, like gravity. Climate change is a fact, like gravity or the orbit of the of the Earth around the sun. Like it's just a fact. And when they would talk about it, and I saw it with my own eyes, the increased temperatures meant a hotter and drier climate, made it harder to grow food. And in a community, in a country where people are very dependent on just like subsistence agriculture, that is severe. And then because of that increased heat, think about where rain comes from. It's coming from water in the atmosphere reaching a certain level. Well, when it's that hot, water's evaporating more intensely and more fiercely. So there's actually more extreme rain. So you go from drought to suddenly, when it rains, it's not just lightly raining. We're talking hard, heavy rain. And then the ground, I don't know if you've ever tried to like water your grass or a part of your yard when it's really, really dry, but it doesn't accept the water.
That's
When
right.
when water hits dry ground, it just runs off and that causes flooding. And so like the cycle of devastation that has been caused by, frankly, just like overuse, burning fossil fuels, perpetuating changing climate, increased temperatures. It's creating chaos in the world. It's increasing hunger. It's devastating farmers. It's having a huge impact. And so like for me personally, like I came to the environmental concern through my human concern. I was such a passionate humanitarian that I couldn't ignore it. It was so central. But then when I got there, I like laid hands on that tree and had moments like that. And I was like, oh, I'm here even just for its own sake. Like God made this so good and I will fight to protect it. I am unashamedly a hugger of trees, 100%. Me, when I was younger, would have made fun of me now, but I really believe it. Like there's something remarkable about what God has made, and to commune with it, to connect with it, to see God's hand in the vitality of the environment in spite of humans. That is something. I mean, like when I see a tree and I'm like, no matter all that we have done, you're just still here doing what God created you to do. You're just still standing. I mean, it is on a spiritual level, it's really been amazing to actually be an environmentalist. I never expected it, but you know.
I think it's a thing people forget. Like the world, we won't destroy the world. Like the world will outlive us.
Yeah.
We could destroy it enough to where we don't make it.
Yeah.
But like,
I
world's
mean,
pretty resilient.
I'm a pretty curious person. I find myself like researching things often. And I remember once I Googled like what would happen if there were no trees? Just to understand like, I don't know, what role are they playing in the world? What I discovered was like if there were no trees, if they were just suddenly all gone overnight, which will never happen, but if that did happen in this hypothetical, trees are like filters of air pollution and toxic things that are just floating in the air and in the soil. So when trees are gone, suddenly the air would become so toxic, and the absorption of CO2 that trees provide would reduce this and that. The oceans would become boiling hot, and every single living thing would die except
Lord have
for
mercy.
jellyfish. They would somehow survive. I remember that. And eventually, all of humanity would die. You
Mhm.
just remove one thing from like God's design, and like the whole house crumbles. That's what I
Mhm.
mean when I talk about like interdependence. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Jason, we've talked a lot in this conversation about you working internationally, doing really interesting things internationally. And I know that, one of the things that I have been really concerned about is our international relations here as Americans, as like just concern in general, right? I know, the more recent international travel I've done, some of the guidance that I've gotten is, hey, don't identify yourself too closely as an American. Like, don't stick out like a sore thumb, because Americans in America is not the most popular place in the world right now. That concerns me for several reasons, but I want to hear from you as a person who's done so much international work. What's going on with our international relations? So, as people are saying, America first, America first. I think I understand the concept. I don't know that it's a theologically acceptable concept, but I understand what folks are saying, right? What we are not going to ever be is a world that has been deglobalized. Unless we're trying to be North Korea, we will
yeah,
never be deglobalized. We will always, I mean, the internet is here now. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I just want to know how you're feeling about our relations overall, and what you think is going to take to get in a better place with our neighboring countries.
Mm. I mean, that's a good question. And I'm not, I definitely don't think I'm an expert in this, but I can speak from like my personal experience, right?
Yeah,
Which
please.
is I think I've visited maybe 4 or 5 different countries just in the last 6 months. And our friends and neighbors are watching us with confusion, some hurt, some fear even,
Mm-hmm.
and a whole lot of sympathy. Like they feel for our experience right now because they're
Mm,
shocked at some of the things they're seeing, the rollback of civil rights, the assault on DEI, just like a lot of things that people didn't expect from a country that tried to make a name for itself as carrying like values of democracy and freedom and all this kind of stuff. But it's definitely taken a toll. You said something that I think is really true. We are never going to deglobalize. Like there's a delusion out there that we could just focus on us, and my neighbor is literally my neighbor. But I'm like, this shirt was
that's
held
right.
like this was held in the hands of a woman in Vietnam. She sewed this and I wear it. I wore it yesterday too. So I wear this 2 days in a row. You're telling me
Right.
like her cells, her skin cells are on my shirt. You're telling me she's not my neighbor? So like globalization has made all like capitalism has made everyone my neighbor somehow.
That's
Okay?
right.
But then you're telling me politically that none of these people are my neighbor. Like there's a mismatch, but you can't have both. And so I just find it interesting, like just the success even of capitalism in creating neighborliness in a commerce sense, but not in a care and concern sense, And so I think it's tough. I was in Europe and just listening to friends and colleagues try to make sense of the world we're in. I am, you both know me, and I roll in very Christian communities. That's like the affiliations that I have. And there's a second layer of kind of confusion and grief there because they see the poll numbers and in the support at large of Christians of many of these policies. And they feel a confusion. Like, how can you celebrate the destruction of USAID while following the same Jesus that we know you follow? How can you, where is the disconnect? And so I think it's going to take a long time for those things to be repaired, if they will be. We don't know yet what's going to happen, and I am not going to pretend that things will just carry on some normal trajectory and eventually settle. We have no idea what is going to happen.
So with that in mind, what's bringing you hope these days? So despite everything that we see and every headline and just the way a lot of our church and religion seems to be in bed with empire and power, what is the thing that's keeping you smiling and putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah. And I should apologize to people listening. I know I'm an intense person, and I just
need to apologize.
Okay.
They listen to me and John all the time.
Okay,
you
perfect.
Good.
Okay, perfect. Like, I know these are all heavy things, right? And we didn't even talk about my role as a chief diversity officer and what that has been like in this time. But
God, you gotta come back, Jason.
We'll save that for another time. But
okay.
Yeah, all I mean, what's giving me hope is, like, I do believe in the rule and reign of Jesus Christ. Like, I really do. It is not an idea. It is not a theory. And so I see the evidence of his kingdom constantly. I see people loving sacrificially. I see churches being who they were called to be, loving their neighbor as themselves, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. So I have this privileged position of having like a front row seat to Christians doing transformative things in their community. I get to hear about and see, whether it's through my work or through boards that I serve on with different nonprofits, I just get to see like the church planting trees. I get to see the church in Gaza feeding children who are starving.
Yes,
I get to see Christian communities and churches in South Sudan protecting vulnerable women who experienced violence and war. So I just I hear these stories and they don't ever end. Like Christ is alive and working through his people. So
yes.
I find that to be a never ending supply of hope. Like, it is just immense. The other thing, honestly, that gives me hope, and this is getting a little more micro, is I do work at a university. I teach a few classes, and the young people, many of whom come in on like a default setting of Christian means signing up for X, Y, and Z politics. That's just their default.
Yeah.
And I discover in having them in class over time that their kind of embrace of the times, so to speak, embrace of the empire, that's a shallowly held belief. What's a deeply held belief is their faith.
Yes.
And they just never knew that faith could equal something else. Every example they were ever given, they don't know Cornel West. They don't know James Cone. They don't know the Black liberation tradition. I asked one of my classes, what's something new I made them listen to Dr. King's sermon, Paul's letter to the American church. Ooh, there's a recording of it on the King Center website. You can listen to the audio. It is unbelievable. I have them listen to that. I said, what's something new you learned here? Only one person in my class knew that Dr. King was a Christian.
Lord have
The
mercy.
entire rest of the class had no idea he was a believer, had no idea the civil rights movement was a Black church movement, had no idea any of these things. So I know I'm kind of going on longer than you wanted.
No,
but
you're good.
Watching these students wake up gives me hope.
That
It gives me hope.
I'm not even there. Ooh, Lord have mercy.
It gives me so much hope. Yeah.
Good, Jason. Jason, we got so much to talk about. Will you come back?
I will.
Please come back?
I will. Let's do another one.
Okay, let's do another.
And
I need to know several things. I need to know what you teach. I need to know about the chief diversity officer work, because that'll take us off somewhere else. That is a huge conversation for now with the DEI stuff that's rolled back. But I just really love you. We love you and appreciate you so much. I'm so glad you're in the world with us. I really am. Thank God. You. Makes me feel better just know that you're walking around somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you both, and have like distinct memories of like moments in my own journey interacting with both of you at critical times, and feel like a deep gratitude and feel a genuine like, oh, this is my brother and sister in Christ for real, for real. And so I appreciate you both so much, and thank you for taking all this time with me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
For sure.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
That was a gift.
All right. Till next time.